what channels working with smallholder farmers would be best to deliver this kind of a solution? Because largely smallholder farmers, as you see the way they are organized, um, I mean, less than five acres per smallholder farmer. I mean, there has to be a need for an aggregated model for it to work. I mean, what would you say to that respect?
Thank you. Just a quick brief about AFC. AFC is a financial institution, a DFI, wholly owned by the government, and focusing 100% on the agri-sector. We work with all the value chain actors, from producers up to the market exporters, and so on and so forth. We also have a special focus on the excluded, or the smallholder farmers, the women, the youth, and we have initiative that I'll talk later about to make sure that these groups are included. Coming to those groups, one of them is smallholder farmers, and their key issue is not lack of access to financial sources, is the aspect of collateral and collateral mechanisms. So you also look at the don't have economies of scale as an individual unit, but it would be better if they are collective in a cooperative as group. Just finance, but also access other services, including, input, sourcing of inputs, sourcing of other services, and even bargaining or having a voice in policy and other issues around the operations. So a collective model is the best way to go. And I'll give a short perspective of AFC. 3 years ago, through the assistance of AGRA and IFAD, we developed a wholesale lending model focusing on SACCOs that are in agri-sector. We have been able to triple our outreach to smallholder farmers. And the funny thing about that, or the most interesting thing, is that that model or that scheme has 0% arrears or default. Yeah? Yet we are reaching the smallest farmers, the smallest micro, medium, SMEs in agriculture, and it has worked. So for smallholder farmers, what do we need for them? I think the starting point should be aggregating them in common perspective groups, especially SACCOs, producer cooperatives, marketing cooperatives, and so on and so forth.
In that data that we was more or less the rationale for this discussion, there is a comparative disadvantage to women, especially so in access to some of these collateral, as you mentioned, because again, contextually women, socially, socioculturally in Kenya, they are largely disadvantaged towards access to land. Would you probably just want to talk about that a bit in the context of group-based model financing and how we can bring on board a lot of women into an active, full-scale, sector-wide access to finance, so to speak? What would be your views on that?
Thank you. Actually, that is a very critical aspect. If you look at the FSD Central Bank FinAccess Survey, the last one of 2021, you'd see that though the financial access has improved, in agri-sector, it is worse compared to other sectors. And in agri-sector, it is worse for women as compared to men. Going back to our perspective that AFC has an experience in, from that wholesale lending model, the outreach before, our portfolio was around 8% outreach to women. In the cooperative or wholesale lending model targeting cooperatives and SACCOs, the outreach to women is more than 50%. You can see the impact. Why? Women in agri production and agri MSMEs, they are more organized in groups. They have more membership, or they ascribe more to SACCOs and groups as opposed to doing it individually. So is it going to address the issue of exclusion? I think so, especially to women and youth.
I would have wanted to go into collateral management right now, but before I get there, you mentioned aspects of policy, and probably just to request Tito to address this. Are the policies, guiding this kind of an endeavor sufficient, in your own view? And do you think that there is more to be done within that space?
Yeah, so there are some gaps, policy related. I would like to think of the kind of problem in two kind of distinct ways. One relating to reach and the other relating to confidence in the warehouse receipt system and warehouse receipt financing. Relating to REACH, the infrastructure that is currently present in the country for warehousing solutions on the number of warehouses is quite inadequate and quite far from the smallholder farmer. One of the ways to address this, of course, is to encourage private warehouses to open up and operate. However, licensing of private warehouses is a key challenge, largely because licensing is done at a county level, and there isn't a harmonious or coordinated way of ensuring that the licensing requirements for private warehouses are the same across the counties. So a private warehouse operator would face different licensing requirements, different waiting times across different counties, which makes it much more harder to scale its operations across the country and therefore reach small scale producers easily. On confidence within the warehouse receipt system, I know that the Warehouse Receipt System Council is doing a lot of work on this, but one of the ways to boost confidence, especially amongst small-scale producers, is digitizing that ecosystem, enabling them to have a real-time view of kind of the management of the produce that they have deposited at different warehouses. A digital platform or a USSD platform that would enable them, just give them that confidence that I can go on my phone, use a USSD code, check that, hey, actually my produce is still at this warehouse operator and is safe, would really boost the confidence of small-scale producers to kind of get into warehousing and increase the adoption of this. On the other hand, for financial institutions, there's also an issue of confidence in the effectiveness of the deposited produce as collateral, as a credit risk mitigation measure. It's a new system in the financial sector, and therefore there are questions, there are a few doubts that commercial financial institutions will have about it. So policies such as, by the government to say share risk or to provide some credit guarantee mechanism could help alleviate those concerns and just boost confidence in the short term as financial institutions get experience working with warehouse receipt financing solutions.
How about, say, the regulatory space? Is it sufficient to handle this kind of an engagement within the country, in your own view?
I think, so there are a number of, say, international regulations that, would make some financial institutions a bit nervous about going into warehouse receipt financing. The adoption of IFRS 9 and Basel 3 that make it, that are much more stringent on financial asset classification with respect to risk. But I think that can be, that could be addressed by, providing, for example, the credit risk guarantee or credit risk sharing mechanism.
Jackie, from Tito's point, he mentions collateral management as one of those issues that comes out in the course of this work. What could you elaborate on the status, of collateral management within the warehouse receipt system, as it is?
Okay. So the nature of collateral management in the system right now is we have the financial institutions are actually the ones that appoint collateral managers to manage the commodities in the warehouse receipt system. But the other issue is the cost, because there are very few qualified collateral managers in the country. I think about 5, the last I checked. And who then would then that cost would be then passed on to the farmer, making it not making it advantageous to them. So what we are trying to discuss in the ecosystem is whether now some of the warehouse operators would serve as collateral managers to be able to, not have an additional cost burden. So the existing warehouse operators like NCPB would be able to do that. And then for financial institutions, they could, if there are various, let's say about 2-3 financial institutions, and they feel like they want to appoint an independent collateral manager, then they can appoint one so that they can share the cost and not be able to pass that on unfairly to the farmer or the depositor, making the access to the finance more expensive. So that's what we're engaging in.
John, are we ready for a warehouse receipt financing solution? I mean, is Kenya ready?
I could say yes and no. From commercial bank perspective, I think as Tito said, commercial banks are about, they're quite reluctant, but as a DFI, we must make the market for the other commercial bank to see what can work, what cannot work. For AFC, yes, we are ready. As you are aware, we have been supported by AGRA, by FSD. We have developed a product, a pilot, and a pilot framework. And you're just waiting for some few areas to be fine-tuned, and we are ready for a rollout. Actually, we were targeting to have it rolled out and document the lessons by this harvest season. In terms of what we need to do to make sure the commercial banks are ready, I think Jackie has addressed. We need to make sure that we address few things that are pending, because commercial banks in our last sitting, they told us, as long as you show us it can work and there is money, we'll come in all forms and sizes, and we'll come and finance. That would be my response.
I guess my last question to all is, what do we need to do? What partnerships do we need to put in place to see this off? And also just a parting shot from this conversation, so that I give it to the audience if they have questions to yourselves to ask you.
So do I start?
I'll start with you.
Thank you. For me, I'll look at it from two sides. One is the demand side for the warehouse to work. And I'm seeing a close friend I was chatting with just a few minutes ago, and I was talking about how can they play in and provide market or some kind of offtake during the pilot, and that is World Food Program. They are quite a big market for cereals and pulses. Because for this to work, there must be partnership from both the service providers, the financial service providers, and also the markets. How do we make sure that, for those who are capable of documenting lessons and fine-tuning the product, are able to do that? And for those who are able to, support the capacity like the way FSD and AGRA has done, both for commercial banks and DFIs, you support capacity to develop customized products for customized value chains. I think that, in short, would be my perspective in terms of working partnerships.
Thank you, John. Jackie?
Well, I would add the same thing. We need the demand side. So we've been engaging the millers as well, both the Cereal Millers Association and the United Grain Millers Association. And now we want to also engage with the WFP. So for the millers, it's key because they're the majority of the off-takers. So if they can now purchase the commodities off of the warehouse receipt system, it would now trigger or be a signal to the producers that this is the way to go. They'll be able now to store, to be incentivized to store their commodities in licensed warehouses, and they'll know that they have the end market in sight, which will then also trigger the financial institutions to be able to come on board much quicker than they are right now. So that's what I feel.
Thank you, Jackie.
I think in addition to off-takers, a key partnership is also, or a key player within this partnership ecosystem is the commodity exchange, offering a way for price discovery that is favorable to all parties, especially the small-scale producers and aggregators. And in addition to that, I would also say there is an opportunity for development finance institutions, global or other DFIs to come into the picture, providing that risk sharing or credit guarantee mechanism for to cushion this sector as it takes off.
Thank you, Revanche. Let's give a round of applause to the panelists. I guess I'll open it up to the audience. We tried to have this session short, focusing on 4 hypotheses. One is on value retention for smallholder farmers, traders, processors, wholesalers, and other value chain actors. 2, our readiness to implement the solution. 3, the collateral management, whether it's robust enough to handle this. 3 is the model that works, whether the cooperative model is one that we could onboard. And 4, the policy, whether the policy environment is robust. And of course, there's a couple of things that are in between. The report of this work should be released at the start of next year.
Small-scale producers are not currently, due to the reach of the warehousing infrastructure, are not as able to deposit their produce in warehouses and would actually depend on some aggregator. The most optimal aggregator would probably be cooperatives, because one, if they're off-taking from these small-scale producers, they would do so at a price that kind of considers their interests. Cooperatives are, formed by the farmers themselves, and they would therefore then have some say in that, price discovery. And secondly, they could also have a mechanism of passing on the financing to the farmers should they opt out of the off-taker kind of way of taking that produce from small-scale producers. So it does, we are trying to essentially protect the small-scale producer from exploitative middlemen. However, in the long run, it is our view that with a wider adoption of the warehouse receipt system, that affects the volatility in prices, because farmers then have a mechanism of storing any glut, any excess at harvest time, and what then is taken or offered to the market is just what is demanded. So it then has the effect of kind of flattening that price across the year, and therefore, essentially, even if there are middlemen, they become just another alternative to the small-scale producer over and above warehouses and the cooperatives. And therefore, middlemen will not have as much power in dictating prices for small-scale producers as they have now in the medium to long term once this warehouse receipt system is fully functional.
Yeah, thank you, Tito, for that. Actually, just to add on his point, if you look at the more organized value chains like milk, the brokers are there, the middlemen, but they are price takers. They move with the prices that are set by the cooperatives and the whole mechanism. So that will be what will be the end solution when the warehouse receipt system ecosystem is ready and working. In terms of opportunities in other value chains beyond crops, yes, there are. When we did the survey with Agra, we went to as far as Mombasa, and one of the most interesting aspects was the fish and the seafood value chain is a great opportunity for this. How it can be done, as Tito said, is a new product. We are trying to learn using one pilot, then we can see how we can scale. So there are other opportunities in other value chains beyond crops. And also in crops, there are numerous opportunities beyond maize and cereals, and other pulses. In terms of cooperative preparedness, I'll go back to the last question that you, Jared, asked. What is the essence of partnership? What is happening now through partnership that I mentioned earlier, including IFC, we are undertaking currently sensitization and trainings of cooperatives in the target pilot counties in Northern Rift Valley, and it is working. People are willing to come together and deposit, and they are seeing the sense of, having warehouse as part of their, the value chain management, reducing post-harvest losses, accessing better returns, accessing finance, and so on and so forth. So there are those who are prepared, and there are those we are preparing right now, of course, in collaboration with the Warehouse Receipt Council, Government of Kenya, Ministry of Agriculture and Trade, IFC, AGRA, and FSD. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll add to something that both my colleagues here have said. So on the issue of uptake by farmers, there's something that we learned early last year and towards the end of 2021 is the other big challenge is the issue of post-harvest handling. Because you cannot store poor commodity in a warehouse. It will continue deteriorating. So when we did the launch of the WRS in January of last year, we had spent a lot of time in Kitale, in Trans Nzoia actually, the 5 sub-counties, and the rejection rate was about 86%. This is both smallholders in the cooperative societies and large-scale farmers. Because a lot of, you talk to a farmer and they're saying, oh, we have this much that's going to come in. But when it came time to test before storage, high aflatoxin, yes, that was also affected by the heavy rains that had come in just as the beginning of harvest season. But there was also, they did not know, and in fact the demand now is they need to know what good, grade 1 maize looks like, what grade 2 looks like, and all of that. So we have had to do one step backwards and undertake and facilitate training on post-harvest handling to enable this produce to get into the warehouses. So that's the one challenge, to enable uptake. So that has been the demand from the producers. Then on the issue of traders, I think we've really vilified traders, but they play a very key role, and they can be used to play a key role. They can be the primary market makers, because there are some farmers who will not agree to store because they need money for immediate needs, and they don't have enough to be able to, there are those who don't have enough to be able to sell off excess. So they'll provide the liquidity at that particular point for those who want to sell off quickly, and then again at the secondary point where they're off-taking as well, again from those who've stored to be able to sell off to their off-takers. So they can be inbuilt, and when we get more structured, then we'll have, the trading houses the same way we have, for coffee and these other commodities, because this is a big bigness, and organize them in that manner. Then in the issue of imports, you'll be very surprised that the farmers actually know the cycles of when imports are coming into the country. So I remember having a conversation with some of the farmers in the North Rift, and they said, we know when the imports are, because they're neighbors to Uganda, Tanzania, so they know when they're coming in. So they said, we will not store at this particular, those who will not store immediately at harvest, they will store probably around February, and they know when to sell. In fact, they said, why are you telling us 6 months or 8 months? And we know, we want it for, why are you telling us a maximum of 6 months? We might need it for 8, because we know when the imports will come, the prices will go down, and then once the import season is over, the prices again go up because of the demand. So they're actually quite well versed. So the key thing would also be for any depositor to be able to know or to understand the value chain, because again, we cannot stop imports because of our arrangements in the East African Customs Union. Then on the opportunities, meat, there's a demand for storage facilities for WRS in meat and fish. Mm-hmm. The only challenge is the availability of cold chain storage facilities in the country, and this also affects some of the horticulture produce like potato. So we're trying to put in place investment portfolios and ask for the private sector to invest in this, because there's high demand. For instance, in Narok, they produce quite a lot of beef, but they bring it all the way to Dagoretti, to the abattoirs here, because they don't have those facilities in that county, so they're losing out. So these are the opportunities that will be able to bring on board some of this some of these other commodities in place.